This is the 8th part on the reactive programming course in Dart and Flutter. And today I have a little more complex Flutter app that has a list of blog posts and their creation dates. And also we have an edit page, and we're also going to use that edit page in order to create new blog posts. So now we're going to implement logic using string controllers and streams and that kind of stuff that we have learned over time. So yeah, I'm going to create a simple class that's going to be called blog post view model, but you can call it blog post block or whatever, it really doesn't matter. It's just what I'm going to name it. So let's say new folder and view models, and in there I'm going to put blog post VM for view model, and add the .dart extension to it. So over here we have a class that's going to be called blog post view model. All right. Now here we're going to have a string controller that will contain a list of all our blog posts, and also we're going to have a stream and a sync that are basically just getters for the properties of that string controller. Alright, so as you may notice, we have here a list of blog posts. Blog post is just a model class I created in order to represent the data model for our application. And I think this is going to be pretty much enough for now. And now let me go over to blog post list. And this is just a widget that displays this list of blog posts. And that widget is currently just consuming this hard-coded list of blog posts and displaying it, let me just find it, displaying it in this list view builder. So yeah, and what our goal is to remove this hard-coded data. So let me cut it out. And for now, I'm just going to copy it to the VM just temporarily. You'll see why. Let me have that over here. All right. And now we want to consume the stream from our view model, but we need to get an instance of our view model, which we can do just by going final VM is equal to new blog post view model. But if you are using this type of pattern, you would most likely want to just register all of your view models in some kind of a service locator. And luckily Dart has a package, basically a service locator package named GITHUB. In main.dart we can just register all of the dependencies we need and we can just retrieve them. So let's install the GITHUB package. I'm now going to type in GITHUB Flutter, or actually we can just say Dart. And over here is going to take us to the Dart pub website. We're going to go to the installing tab and copy the name of the dependency and the version. Now let me go back to Visual Studio Code and let's go to our pubspec.yaml file. If you're not familiar, pubspec.yaml is basically used for registering all the dependencies that our Flutter app is going to have, or basically all the libraries that we're going to use. And we're just going to paste in what we copied from the official website over here. And I'm going to save this file, and the VS Code extension for Flutter should automatically install this package for me. So let me save it. And yes, it's running this Flutter packages get. Alright, now that it got the dependency, we can use it. So over here I'm going to create a function called setupLocator. And here I will register all the services that we will need. And in our case, this is just going to be the login view model. So I'll just say get it. And Visual Studio Code is offering me to automatically import the package, which I'm of course going to accept. And here we have two properties, I and instance. I is just short for instance, so we don't have to type instance. So yeah, these are pretty much the same. I'm just going to use I for the convenience sake. And here we have a couple of options. The first one is register factory. This means that whenever we try to get the service that we want, a new instance will be created. Then we have register singleton. This is going to immediately create an instance of that class, and that instance is going to be used every time it's called. And we have register lazy singleton, it's kind of similar to register singleton method, but register lazy singleton creates the instance of that object when the service is firstly called. So if I register a login view model using the register lazy singleton method and actually never try to use it through the getIt locator, an instance would never be created. But with register singleton, it would immediately create the instance right in this line, and it doesn't matter if it's used or not. So over here what we want is register lazy singleton, because we're actually going to kind of feed some hard-coded data into the string controller when the object is first initiated. So yeah, we want that to be fed into the stream just at the time that it's firstly called, if that makes any sense. So this requires a function that will return that service. So here this is going to be an empty parameter function, and it's going to return an instance of login view model. And now I need to import it. Actually, it's not login view model, I'm sorry, it's blog post view model. And now I'm going to import it. And now the way we're going to retrieve this is going to our blog post list. And over here I'll just create a getter for the view model. So let's say blog post view model, and say get in order to create a getter, give it a name. I'm just going to call it VM for view model, and we're going to use the getIt instance, auto import it, .i dot, oh actually not dot, but here we need to pass in the type parameter, and that's the type of the service that we're getting. And the type of the service is blog post view model. And here we'll just say empty. Right, so what this basically means is it means get me the instance I registered over here. And what I also forgot to do is we need to call the setup locator function, and we need to call it before the run app method executes. So yeah, let me save that. Right, and now we will fix the errors we have below. We're just going to wrap the list view builder in a stream builder, and we're going to say list of blog post, and the stream is going to be vm.out blog post list. And over here we are using this blog posts list that does not exist, but we can just say final blog posts is equal to snapshot.data. If you watched my previous video, you know that this is how we retrieve data that's actually emitted by the stream. Alright, but if we do not have data yet, we may just want to display a loading indicator. So if snapshot.hasData is equal to false, then we want to return a circular progress indicator. Alright, now that looks good. And one thing left is go to our view model and actually take this hard-coded data, copy it, and use it in the constructor. Let's just say blog post view model. It does not take any parameters. And here we have the list. Let me just close it out like this. Alright, let me remove this final blog posts. And we're going to use a sync to add some blog posts so we just have them in the app. Alright, let me collapse this. Actually, I cannot. Let me do it like this. Okay, and now I just need to close out the array. And let me tab this in. What we just did here is whenever the view model is instantiated, and as we said, when we're registering a singleton, it happens only one time, and when we're registering a lazy singleton, it executes only the first time that the view model is actually called somewhere. So whenever that happens, we just get all this hard-coded data and put it into a stream. But if we want to see some type of loading, let's just say that we want a delay of 3 seconds and then we want the data. So let's say future.delayed and say that duration is going to be 3 seconds. And then we're going to put this adding of the blog posts in the then callback. So let me move this up over here, tab it in, and save all of this. Alright, now we get a couple of errors, and I think in order to fix it, we just need to restart the whole application. Alright, and just as we expected, we get a loading of 3 seconds and we get our hard-coded date. Alright, so now we should implement the creating and editing logic of blog posts. So when we go to add new blog post, you can see that we have this edit blog post title and we have this delete button, but we cannot delete a blog post that's not been created yet. So we need to go to our blog post modify page and implement some logic over here. So I think that the easiest way to determine if we're editing, actually the easiest way to kind of reuse this page for both creating and editing is to pass in a blog post in the constructor. And if the blog post is null, then we can just say that we're creating a new blog post, and if it's not null, then we're editing it. So we're going to do it like this: create a constructor and have a parameter that's going to be this.blog post, and it's going to be a blog post over here. And let me import it. And let me just set it to be final because this is a stateless widget. Alright. So basically now this blog post is an optional parameter in this constructor, and if nothing is passed in into the constructor, then this is going to be immediately null. So we can determine if the blog post property is equal to null, that means we are creating a new blog post. And if it's not equal to null, then we can determine that we are actually modifying a blog post. So just for readability's sake, I'm going to create a property, actually a getter, that's going to say is editing, and it's going to be editing if the blog post is not equal to null. So it's bool, which stands for boolean, get and is editing, and that's going to be equal to blog post not being equal to null. I think that makes sense. So if the blog post is not equal to null, that means we're editing. So now here we have the title, and we can use an inline if statement in order to check if we're editing or not. So if we are editing, then it's edit blog post, and if it's not, then it's just create blog post. And also we have this delete button that we talked about, and if we're creating a new post, we don't want this button to be seen. So it's kind of the same philosophy. If we are editing, we want the icon button to be shown, but if we're not editing, we'll just display an empty container, which is not going to affect UI. So let me save this. And right now we are in that creation mode, so we don't have anything. When we click on an already existing blog post, we also get the create blog post because we're not passing anything in. So let's fix that. Let's go to our blog post list and find where we open that blog post modify page. Alright, so here we have the blog post itself. So what we could just do over here when we're opening a new page is just say blog post is equal to blog post and save this. Right, and now when I click on the blog post, it says edit blog post and it has this delete button. Alright, so when we're editing a blog post, we want these fields to be actually filled out with the title of the blog post we're editing, the content, and the author. So let's do that right now. So here in blog post modify, or actually let me first create, we have 3 text fields for title, for content, and for author. And if you're not familiar with how to mutate the text inside text fields, it's through text editing controllers. So let me create 3 of those, one for title, one for content, and one for the author. Alright, now we have those. And here in the constructor, we should initialize their values. So if the blog post is not null, that means we're editing. So if we're editing, we should set the title controller.text to be equal to blog post.title, and then the content controller.text to be equal to blog post.content, and also for the author controller.text to be equal to blog post.author. So let's do that. Alright, now we should get our fields basically filled out. Let me save this file, and I'll also restart the app just to make sure. And let's wait for a couple of seconds. We get our blog posts loaded. When we click on a blog post, nothing is being filled in, and that's because we declared these controllers but we didn't actually use them. So it's title controller, and over here we need to say controller is title controller. Over here it's content controller. And over here it's going to be author controller. Now let me save that. And yes, these fields are getting filled out. And every single one is unique to its own blog post. So yeah, and when we click on add new blog post, we get exactly what we want. All the empty fields without the button, just saying create blog post. So yeah, now we should implement creating and updating blog post logic. So let's go first to our blog post view model. And let's just create a method that's going to be called add blog post. And we're going to take an instance of a blog post. Actually, let's just say blog post for, I don't know, consistency's sake. So we need to get the current list of blog posts and then add this blog post to that list and then add that whole list into this sync. So the new list would be emitted. And that's going to be kind of, I don't know, impossible to do with string controllers to just say, I don't know, blog post list controller dot value. That does not exist. But you will see in the next video with RxDart that can be done very easily. But right now I'm just going to hold the list of blog posts over here locally as a property, even though that's not the best way. But since we are not going to use RxDart in this video, that's how we're going to do it for the time. So let's say blog posts, make it private, and over here we're going to listen to our own stream, out blog post list dot listen, and our blog posts are going to be equal to date. And what did I do wrong? Oh, I actually made this a list of lists. Alright, that's better. Now only thing we have to do is just add this to the blog post list and then add the blog post list to the blog post sync. Add blog posts. Alright, and now we need to call this method inside our blog post modify. So over here we have the save button, and if we're editing we want to do one thing, and that's save changes. We're going to do that as a next step, but now we just want to create a new blog post. And that's going to be vm.addBlogPost. Now we need to retrieve that VM, and that's why I said to use GETIT and that type of stuff, because we want to use the same instance across multiple widgets. So let me cut this and just use it down here. Import the ViewModel, import GETIT, and yeah, now let me go down here. And now we need to create an instance of a blog post. So it's going to be final blog post. It's going to be equal to a new blog post. And the title is going to be equal to title controller.text. Content is going to be equal to content controller.text. And the author is going to be equal to the author controller.text. And also we're going to generate a random ID and next int up to, I don't know, what's this, 100,000. And also we're going to make a publish date, date time dot now. Alright, and now we can add this blog post into our blog post list. So let me save this. Let me restart the app just to make sure. Alright, let's click on add new blog post. And let's just type in something random. Test post 1. Alright, content is 1, 2, 3. And author is me. And let me click save. Let me go down here. And we have that test post. When I click on it, all this info gets nicely filled out. Alright, so the next step is actually updating an existing blog post. So that's going to be fairly easy, but over here we're just going to use the same instance of a blog post, but we cannot generate a random ID because then we're not going to be able to find the current blog post in order to update it. So if we're editing, then the ID stays what it was. and it's in the this.blogpost.id, and else, then we're generating a new ID. So I don't know if this is clear to you. If we're editing a blog post, we do not want to make a new ID, but we're going to use the old ID because we can find the blog post that we want to update with the ID. But if we're going to create a new blog post, we're just going to generate a random ID. I mean, this is not really that safe because we can generate a duplicate ID, but for this example, it's going to be sufficient enough. Alright, so now we can go to our blog post view model and create a method that's going to be called update blog post, and let's just pass in an instance of a blog post, and over here we're going to find the index of the blog post by ID, and then we're going to change the blog post in that list by the index that we find, and then we're going to add the list over here into the sync. So yeah, what we're doing here, we are getting the index of this blog post, and we find this blog post by the ID, and then we get the blog post at that index and set it to the newly updated blog post, and then we just add the list to the blog post list so it would be updated in the UI. So let me go over here, let me restart the app just in case. Alright, now when I click on a blog post and say, I don't know, blog post 211 and click save, nothing happens because I am not calling this update blog post method over here. So update blog post, save it. And let me try that again. Let me save it. Yeah, it's correctly updating the data. Let me just try it again. Save, and it updated the data. And the last thing we need to implement is deleting the data. It's just the easiest. Void remove or delete blog post. And we just need to pass in the ID, because we don't need the whole instance in order to find the blog post to delete. And we can just say blog posts dot remove where and just pass in a condition, and it's going to be that the blog post ID is going to be equal to the ID passed into the parameter. And then again, we're just going to add those blog posts into the sync. And over here we need to call that method up here in the icon button, and when it's pressed, vm dot delete blog post, and the way we're going to get the ID is from the blog post property we have, and that's going to say blog post dot ID. Let me save it, and let me go to blog post number 3, delete it, and now we do not have the blog post 3 anymore. Right, and that's pretty much it. In the next video I'm going to show you the perks of the RxDart library, and so yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you next time.